Welcome to 15 Minutes with Kate. Kate is a copywriter and messaging coach who's obsessed with helping entrepreneurs find their voice, share their voice, and own their voice in the online space. She has written copy for multi 6 and 7 figure launches, helping some of the top thought leaders in the online space connect, grow, and convert their audience through engaging messaging and copy. And she also has coached hundreds of entrepreneurs on how to create authentic, engaging copy that grows their income and impact without having to sacrifice what makes them unique. Welcome to the show, Kate. How are you doing?
I'm so great. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. The first thing that I want to say, which I don't think I ever really told you, is the copy that you helped me write for my sales page. The most recent launch of that for Video Boost converted at 7.14%, which is like awesome. I'm just like super like over the moon for that. That's amazing.
That's
So,
sick.
yeah, thank you. So, what's fascinating about what you do, which is super crazy, is that you help people essentially like create words that sell, like essentially. So, how did you like come to that? Like how did you even come to this thing?
Yeah, I really fell into it, which I always think is funny because people are like, copywriting is such a craft, and it is. It 100% is. But like, I am living proof that anybody could be a copywriter. I've always been into writing. I was doing like long form content marketing at an agency, and I actually just started freelancing on the side. I had no idea like what the online space was about. Like that whole world was really, really not my thing. I was like working with landscaping companies on their, websites, not like online launches. And the more I started freelancing, the more I got introduced into this online world and started working on more and more launches. Cause, I was like, well, a sales page is really just like a sales letter, which is like a sales email. Started studying it more and then decided that that was going to be my thing that I was going to do. I was just going to focus in on copywriting. So it was really by accident. I found a job where someone would pay me to write. And I was like, yes, absolutely. Sure.
That's awesome. So like when I got introduced to this, I had no idea how important like words were. I just thought, you could just go on and just say whatever you want or just get on video and say whatever you want or even just on a because I didn't even know there was a specific sales page that needed to be created. I just said, well, you just need a website. So how for those who maybe aren't convinced, I guess, of like why having great copy is important for just being more effective or even just even having more sales, what kind of impact does having great copy do or have for your business?
I love that question. It changes everything, really. I mean, I always say that, great copy is the foundation of your business because it's what you say everywhere. And I always talk about, great copy really starts with great messaging, which is like the actual stuff you're putting out into the world. It's what you're actually saying. So that means it's not just the written word. It's what you're saying on your videos. It's what you're, saying on your Instagram stories. It's what you're saying everywhere. And so if you learn how to communicate more effectively with your audience, that impacts everything from your audience growth, bringing more members into your community, increasing engagement, increasing those one-on-one conversations where you can learn more about your community, your sales, your retention. I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
I'm trying to figure out the big distinction between having a copy and messaging. Copy is more specifically like the tangible what you write, correct? And
Correct.
then messaging is almost like the overarching, like what you're trying to communicate, like the feel, the essence of it. Is that kind of, am I understanding that correctly? Or am I
Yeah,
off?
absolutely. I like to look at it like your copy is your car and it's like the outside of your car, right? It's like the paint job, it's the rims, it's like making it look really nice. If you're me, it's just taking your car to the car wash because I drive like an old Ford. So, and then your messaging is the gas. So it's what makes the car go. And the reason I like to separate those two is because so many people start with making their stuff sound good. They're like, let me come up with a catchy headline or a cool subject line. And they focus on surface level appearance based things for their copy. And what they're not paying attention to is what do I actually have to say in order to get someone to take action, in order to bring someone into my community. And so I've seen really horribly written stuff perform really well because the message at the heart of it is on point. And so if you start with the message, you're actually doing 90% of the work up front. The 10% is the actual copywriting, right? It's making it, more concise. It's making sure that you're getting to the point. It's adding in some of that creativity, the clarity, but the message is the part that people really struggle with.
I gotta tell you I'm so glad you shared that, because when I first started, I thought the more clever I could be with my words, like it just sounded like I was smart, like I just knew what I was talking about. Like obviously speaking way above everyone's head, in terms of like what I do, video tech, right? I can't just start naming off all these words if they don't have any clue in context what that means. And so thank you for sharing that, because I think that's a big mistake that people who early on, they just want to like show off I know everything, and sometimes you're just missing the mark with that. Is there one thing that if you just want someone to understand this one thing about copy and messaging, in terms of being more effective with their copy or more effective with their messaging, what's one thing that you would want people to take away?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. It's so hard to distill it down into one thing. Because you made the distinction between,
Mm-hmm.
being clever and being clear, I'll leave that one out because you called dibs on that one. I would say, honestly, I think it's tapping into what you really want to say. I think a lot of times, especially in the online space, we get really hung up on what the right way is. So we do things like follow a template or, a step-by-step process, which is awesome. Like I'm a huge fan of templates. Build your, file of inspiration, go hack a funnel, whatever you need to do. But I think a lot of times what happens when we do that is we kind of turn off our inner voice of like, hey, this is what I'm actually trying to share with my audience. And we're not really paying attention to what's on our heart to share, or we're not listening to our audience because we're so focused on, well, the template says I have to lead with this. And so I think if I could get anything across to anybody about copy and messaging, is that it really starts with you, right? It starts with what you're trying to share based off of what you know about your audience. And if you don't know anything about your audience, then that's really where it starts. It starts with getting to know your audience. It's less about what is the right way to, write a sales page. There are 1,000,001 right ways to write a sales page. There are 1,000,001 right ways to write an email. And again, that really goes back to messaging versus copy, right? You can make it sound great, but if you start with what's the actual thing I'm trying to get across, it'll just be so much more natural. And it really helps people not sound so robotic because they get into flow that way.
So you have a program and you help people in many ways with copy and messaging. So let's kind of go into some of the mistakes that you see some people make when it comes to approaching their copy, maybe how they think about it, or just even some of the practical stuff. What's one mistake that you see people make?
I see a lot of people make the mistake of not creating a gap in their messaging, especially when they're launching. So I see, a lot of people who go into like a webinar or a 3-part training or whatever their free experience is, and they promise the exact same thing. They just use their sales messaging in their launch messaging and they don't separate the two. So what happens is like, one, your copy is really redundant, which can usually be a good thing, but it's a bad thing in this situation because it doesn't create any demand for what you're actually selling. And so I always tell people, when it comes to creating copy for your launches, you really want to be thinking about how does my launch create demand for my process that I teach inside my program, so you can create that gap, right? How do I create demand for what I'm actually going to be showing inside my program or my one-on-one offer or my group coaching, whatever it is, right? My course. And I think that is where a lot of people get hung up, is they go and they like write this beautiful sales page and then they're like, great, my webinar will just promise the same thing. I'll just slap that same tagline onto my webinar. And it creates this like really confusing experience for your audience because they're like, wait, what's the difference? I'm confused.
Wow, that is so true. That's so funny because I feel like I did that early on, which is good to know.
You're not alone. You're not alone.
But it's through this experience of knowing like, okay, like if obviously there's a disconnect between, because like early on when I was doing like a launch of something, I would just be like, oh, this is the answer to everything. And then everyone would come to that webinar or that thing looking for that answer, and I'm like, oh wait, but no, it's this over here, and I completely misguided them. So yeah, that's that. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. Is there
Yeah.
one more? Is there another mistake that you kind of see that you wish like some people wouldn't make, or you just like, okay, look, there's a danger zone right there. Like this thing right here, maybe the way you said it is kind of weird. Is there anything else that's kind of just like a red flag that you see?
I think it would probably go back to the template thing, to be honest with you. I think
Hmm.
relying solely on a template and thinking that's what's going to help you create effective copy
Hmm.
is a really big mistake I see. And it's not what I'm not saying is like don't use a template, right? Like we have templates. I love the templates we offer. It's but the thing that we focus on in our templates is unearthing that messaging, right? What are you
Hmm.
actually saying? And so I think a lot of people think, oh, well, like great copy, I'll just plug it into a template, and they don't go through that thought process. So I think that's probably a really big one, because then you spend a lot of time writing something that is really disconnected.
Okay, so what I teach in my programs a lot is about authenticity, right? So, and I know that's something that you are passionate about too. Could you share your thoughts on what it means to be authentic through your copy and your messaging, and why sometimes it might feel uncomfortable, or why it sometimes doesn't feel right, and what are your thoughts on authenticity and copy?
I love that. I could go down a whole rabbit hole on this.
Yes.
To me, being authentic is just being true to you and who you really are. And I think it can be very difficult in copywriting, especially if you're just getting started or just getting started in improving your messaging and copy, because you pay attention to what other people are doing. And so you naturally take on other people's thoughts, opinions, ways in which they say things, right? You start to emulate the people who are doing it right, in order to make your copy successful. And it creates a disconnect, one, just from you being in tune with what you're really trying to share, and two, in the long term, I've seen it actually attract the wrong audience for some people. So
Mm.
they go and they're like, I'm not sure why I'm attracting these types of people. This isn't who I want to work with. And they go back down and they're like, oh, well, I'm not really in alignment with like what I actually want to do or how I actually want to show up online. And I think that one of the other reasons we do this is because it's a lot less personal when you get rejected, right? If you're presenting something that's not you. Like it's a
Mm.
lot it's a lot easier to take that rejection when you're like, well, I don't really, I don't really show up that way. And
Yeah.
it's me, right? It's my brand. And so I really encourage people to lean into creating something, especially if you're a personal brand, right? That truly exemplifies who you are as a person, because people are signing up to work with you, and your audience wants to know who you are, how you show up, what you believe in. And that's really important to be communicating in your messaging, because that's what helps you attract the right people into your community. And I know it can be scary because, if someone comes up and they're like, you're dumb, you're like, wow, I was really showing myself. Like, thank you for that. But the benefit of that is so much larger, right? The benefit of creating something that's so authentically you. We are some of the only people who get to do that in their careers. Like, how awesome is that? Something that grows
Mm.
on, that's a manifestation of who we are. So yeah, I just think it's really important.
So for those who kind of like are fearful of maybe experiencing some of that rejection, or even wondering how do they tap into more of themselves, right? Because when you first get started, sometimes you need inspiration, right? Like you see what other
Mhm.
people are doing and you see it. So how do you take inspiration, but then also let yourself come through? Is it just kind of like taking your daily conversation that you would normally have? Is it just kind of just sitting in reflection? What's one tip to kind of let yourself kind of come through
Yeah, that's
through
a
your
great
copy?
question. I think it's honestly, to me, it starts with getting really centered on your purpose, right? So
Mm.
what are what are you doing and why are you doing it? And I think that,
Hmm.
we hear this word purpose and we get really overwhelmed. We're like, I didn't start a business. And, I like to look at purpose as something that's evolving, something that'll,
Mm.
continue to grow as you grow. But I think if we can stay centered on like, when you decided to do this crazy thing we call entrepreneurship,
Hmm.
why? Like what drove you to do that? Why do you help the people you help? Why do you offer the services you offer? Because you have beliefs and opinions, right, about those services, about why you want to make an impact in your space, about why you operate in your niche. And so the more you can tune into that and be really clear on that, the easier it's going to be when you're creating content to make sure that you're following that direction and you're staying in alignment with that.
Yeah, it's really clear. Like even hearing you share like how passionate you are about this. Like that's what I like when I hear you speak, and even when you help with like my sales page and everything. Like I can see and hear your passion through it, and that's you, right? And like you're different from anyone else, right? So I love that because like when you can find your passion or like something that lights you up, like when you can just talk and just go, like that's like tap into that, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what I see from you too. So that's amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, that was great. Thank you for sharing all those goodies with us. Okay, so there's 3 questions that I want to ask. Okay, number 1, right now, what is your favorite book right now that you're obsessed with or that you're currently reading right now?
Oh my gosh. So I have been on a young adult fantasy kick, which every time I get asked this question, people are like, I'm talking about business. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm not reading business books. Like, I'm just not reading business books. And this happened at the beginning of, it was like March 2020. And I was like, home and in quarantine like everybody else. And then I just picked up these fantasy books and I can't stop. So like, I can't even pick just one, to be honest with you. I'm just like deep in the young adult epic fantasy genre. And there's no coming out of this hole that I've dug myself into.
That's awesome. I always see that section in Barnes and Noble too, and I never like stop, but I always wonder like who's actually picking these books out.
Me, the whole section, the whole section. I go in for one book and I come out with like 6, and I'm like, what?
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, I love it. I don't think I've ever heard that before, so that's amazing. Okay, second question. Is there a quote that you love or that you kind of go by or something that you kind of remind yourself of?
So I have 2, and they're actually there. So one is a quote from myself,
Ooh.
and it's just all in. And that was like my theme the first year that I started my business, that I was just going to go all in on everything I was trying at all times.
Mm.
So that's something that still resonates with me. And then another one is actually a quote from a friend of mine. He, and I don't think he knows that I have this on my desk, but he said to me once, he said, let's not make a problem out of something that might solve itself if we just give it some time.
Mm.
And he was giving me some business advice. And I feel like that is just should be in every entrepreneur's workspace, right? Because we tend to, in entrepreneurship, I feel like there are so many things that can seem so massive, but like it might just solve itself if we just leave it alone. So that's something that I check in with like once a week if I'm, going over something or like stressing about something as a business owner. I'm like, is this something that might just solve itself if we just give it some time?
Wow, that's a good one. I like
Mm-hmm.
that one. I
Mm-hmm.
need to write that. I need to
Yep.
write that down. That's a good one. Yeah, because like we can make problems so much bigger than they really are.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
like we're living in the moment. It's like no other problem is bigger than this problem that I'm
Yes.
experiencing.
And I was having one of those moments when this was said to me. Like I was like, this is ever happened. And he was like, you gotta chill.
Yeah. Wow, that's good. I like that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. Okay, last question. What do you think separates those who have success or are more effective with their copy or messaging than from those who, aren't effective or kind of just stop or just kind of give up with even trying to be better at this?
Yeah, that's so good. I think honestly, it comes down to whether you can get to a place where you love your copy and messaging. Um, I think a lot of times, and I'm not saying you have to like love writing emails, right? Or love writing a sales page. You might never love writing anything ever. But if you love what you're talking about, then it's going to make this so much easier, and it's going to make you more willing to learn about copy. I believe everyone should learn how to write good copy right before you outsource it. It's going to make it easier to show up because you're going to be lit up by what you're talking about. It's going to make it easier for you to attract the right copywriter when you hire a copywriter, because you know what your message is, and you know when you receive something like, yeah, that's me, no, that's not me. So I think that the more you can fall in love with your messaging and what you're putting out into the world, the people that I see that are most successful with it are the people who absolutely are obsessed with it.
Wow, that's true because every time I approach something, I was like, oh, I gotta write this like long thing. It's like, well, then I'm gonna dread it, right? But if I can approach it with, I'm just gonna talk about what I'm passionate about. It's like, it's a completely different energy behind how I'm approaching writing. So that's awesome. So having the right almost like perspective on what you're doing, like even just tapping into the messaging is cool. Okay, cool. Very, very awesome. Okay, so you have a cool free resource for people on how to write amazing nurture stuff. Am I right?
Yes, I do. It is the 3 steps to writing nurture emails that don't suck, because I've learned that everyone's like, I just ghost my list. Like people just would rather not write emails to their list. So we're going to make it more fun and more simple.
Awesome. So we're going to link that to the free resource. Thank you so much, Kate, for being a guest on this show. This has been a treat and amazing. I trust everyone who's watched got a tremendous value out of this. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course.